Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to India Game Changer. Today we are joined by Piyush Jain, a co-founder and CEO at Impact Guru. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Michael, for inviting me. It's a great privilege to be speaking on this show. I'm doing very well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. All the words in the background are just making me think. I'm trying to come up with sentences for all the words that are behind you. But before we get into the main part of the conversation, can we get a little bit of your background for some context?
Yes, I grew up in India between Kolkata, Mumbai, and New Delhi. And
Okay.
then I went to the US for my undergrad education at Wharton. After studying finance and accounting, I spent 4 years as an investment banker at JP Morgan in New York, Hong Kong, and London. After that, I pursued a master's in public policy at Harvard. That's where I got inspired by the success of crowdfunding in the US and decided to focus my career on scaling Impact Guru, got it incubated there. But I did spend 2 years at BCG in Southeast Asia, refining my problem solving and consulting skill sets before moving to India about 7 years ago to start this company.
What was it like living in Philadelphia? My parents live in Philadelphia. I'm always curious. Like, Wharton's a great school, but Philly's a very interesting city. What's your view?
I think going there as an 18-year-old, you always heard stories sometimes that in certain parts of the city it could be unsafe. But to be perfectly honest, I had arguably the best years of my life
Yeah.
in that city. Really fantastic campus. I was living on campus. Uh, till date, I have some of my best friends from that era, and I'm going back actually to Philly in about 2 weeks' time for my 15-year college reunion. So amazing memories, great culture, great food, very cold for definitely people in India. Minus 25, minus 30 Celsius is not something everybody can handle, but I enjoyed my time there.
Well, so you make a really good point. One of the questions I always ask my Thai friends who go to the University of Michigan, and I choose that purposely, is what do you do in the wintertime, right? When it starts snowing? And the answer I always get is, well, the first time it snows, it's magical, but the second time it's just in the way. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I never understood what black ice was until I slipped slipped on it.
Do you slip on it?
And yes, and it was my first experience with snow generally. But on how to deal with the cold, I'm a pretty determined person, and I thought the best way to get acclimatized to this kind of weather is to go for a morning jog,
Yeah.
6 a.m. Without a lot of layers of winter clothing, so that the rest of the day is fine. That did work on some days, but on some days it was really, really difficult to get out of bed.
I could not agree with you more. I've run in Tokyo in a singlet and in shorts, so I get it, and I like that idea of running in the cold. It makes me feel a lot more energized. It's interesting to go from J.P. Morgan and then go to public policy at Harvard. And I understand when you get to Harvard and you start studying public policy, and there's a big infrastructure there around the public policy learning. But why did you decide to do that as opposed to getting an MBA, just going directly and then going directly back into business? It sounds like this was super purposeful. Was it an idea you had before you went to Harvard, or was it something that got gestated when you were there?
So I grew up in India in the late 90s,
Yep.
when the whole IT tech boom was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And as a teenager, I had learned how to code very basic HTML, etc., on the
Yep.
computers, designing on Microsoft Front Page and those kind of softwares which are completely
Did that.
outdated today. Yeah, and I got a first-hand experience of what running a tech startup means, although as a very early stage kind of entrepreneur in
Right.
that era. And so it was clear to me that in the very long run, I wanted to be an entrepreneur and a tech entrepreneur. And my education at Wharton and my experiences at JP Morgan clearly demonstrated a strong liking towards financial services. And growing up, I have shared this story a few times before that, I never realized how privileged I was
Right.
until I went to an orphanage and I met the children there, and I realized that actually having a home, having parents, being able to go to school is a privilege that so many others do not get on this planet.
Agreed.
And that had a lasting impact for me. And so, as I was thinking about what I wanted to do long term, I was always thinking, how do I combine my passion for technology, finance, and impact together? And the culmination of these three is what eventually helped me to think about ideas like crowdfunding. And so before getting to the crowdfunding idea, I had also toyed with the idea of social impact bonds, which had started to become a new kind of social finance instrument to again scale impact in a very meaningful way, particularly in both UK as well as in some emerging markets. And so I came across the concept of crowdfunding only when I was a student at Harvard University, when I published a paper at Harvard Business School on new ways to fund startups. And at the time, Kickstarter, Indiegogo were doing very well as crowdfunding platforms who had created a new way for entrepreneurs to sell innovative products and services to a very large part of the public online at a very, very quick pace.
Got it. But what made you come back to India then and choose the healthcare space? I mean, I get this idea of technology, finance, and impact. And I mean, I think about it a lot as well, right? I mean, I spent my entire career doing tech and finance, and I spend a lot of time now talking about impact. But there's a big difference, right, between social impact bonds. I'm presuming that there's some lending facility there and some necessity to pay back. Crowdfunding is very different, though, right? Where there may be some
Right.
fees involved, and we can talk about that later. But at the end of the day, you don't have to pay it back, right?
Yeah. Right. So the journey of getting to healthcare was not straightforward. Impact Guru did not start off as a healthcare crowdfunding platform. It started off as a non-profit crowdfunding platform.
Ah,
Our initial view was that if we were to help digitize the fundraising operations of India's 3.3 million nonprofits, that would be a very significant and scalable opportunity. It was only after I moved back to India when we started executing upon all of our academic research and business plans, and I realized that I couldn't be more wrong about it. In the context that Indian nonprofits were getting great CSR support given the unique regulations in India
right.
around that, but still would take a lot more time to accelerate their digital fundraising transformation. And that's when we experimented and opened up the platform and realized that the same technology, the same people, the same systems could be utilized for healthcare. And we stumbled upon that accidentally. And, that we've never looked back since the day when we raised almost $15,000 US for a patient in Hyderabad who needed money for a kidney transplant.
Yeah.
And so it would take us 3 months to raise that kind of money for a nonprofit. But to do that in a week for a patient, it really opened our eyes and we thought, could we do this again? And what was the reason this was successful?
I'm always interested around telling the real stories behind startups. And one of the questions I like to ask, because you hear all this idea of like pivoting and iteration and stuff like that. But there are humans inside of every company, right? And these are the stories that I like the best. If your idea and you hire people to help you do it, whether you have a tech team of 50 people or 5 people, it doesn't really matter. But you said you stumbled upon healthcare, but it still means that the people with whom you're working now have to change their mindset as well. What is that like? Do you know what I mean? Where you're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. It's NGOs, it's raising money for them, it's a nonprofit. And then one day, it's never just one day, right? You just switch. What is it like inside the, and I'm putting it in quotes, office when you kind of get everyone together and say, okay, now we're going to do this thing instead?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I look back at our journey in the first 2 years, I mean, it was constant struggle because you are attempting the same thing again and again. You're talking to thousands of nonprofits. You know that it's a very large target addressable market, but the numbers simply do not demonstrate the kind of traction that you should be getting. And that's when you scratch your head and you think deeply about whether this was a right decision to leave behind a great career at BCG in Singapore and JP Morgan in Southeast Asia and New York. But I think this is where great support from your families. Me and my spouse, Khushbu, we co-founded the company together.
Right.
They always encouraged us that never give up and keep trying. And in that entire process of even unlearning, right, in the first 2 years you unlearn so much about the kind of things you have picked up along the way in terms of education and work experience. And that's when you finally get to a place where you want to think through first principles, where you're like, okay, let me start from scratch, let me experiment and see what happens if I try A, B, or C. And we were very lucky and fortunate that on one Facebook ad, one patient, gave us their telephone number, and then one of our customer calling reps call that person, and then this fundraising happens. It sounds too dramatic, but I mean that's exactly what actually happened. Yeah.
Not really, though. The reason why I like to have these conversations, right, is because, I always like to say everyone's an overnight success 10 years later. The stories that you see in the media are always about, we had this idea, we executed this idea, we're now a billionaire, right? And the world just doesn't work that way. And
Yeah.
also, if you struggled for 2 years, it meant that you had to continue to convince people, not just in your family, but the people that were working with you that, like, you know what, this is the right idea now. And
Hmm.
they kind of have to buy in. Is there a sense of, I don't know the right word, but like wonderment, you know what I mean? When that one ad and that one sales call and that one client ends up with that one success, and then everyone looks around and says, I think we got something here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so that belief needs to be transmitted by founders to all of their senior employees. And at the time, we had about 10 to 15 employees tops. It's very difficult as an early stage startup
Yeah,
to hire and even to retain employees.
sure.
People are not even sure if you will be able to pay their salaries the next month.
And neither are
And
you.
they are absolutely, and they are right in thinking about that at a very early stage. So I think what helped us during all of those days is the sense of self belief
Yeah.
that we will get there. We need to be patient. We need to try. We need to experiment. But if you give up too easily, you have a life of regret.
Yeah.
And we did not want to go down that path. And so we still have to date many of the employees in our company 7 years out after that kind of experience. And that's a testament of the kind of belief that many of those employees have in our vision and our belief in them to help us get to those key moments which can help us leapfrog in terms of a next dimension towards really doing something meaningful and breakthrough.
Yeah, look, I walked into my daughter's room one day. She's 20 now, but she was probably 14 at the time. And she had hung a poster on the wall that said, "In life, you only regret the things you didn't do." And it kind of made me super happy because I felt like even as a 14-year-old, she had the right frame of mind.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah,
Absolutely brilliant.
it's
Yeah.
really great. Can you talk to me at scale, like what the healthcare system looks like in India for people that may not know, right? I
Sure.
mean, 1.3 billion people. I know there are tons of states in India. Many of the states have different languages, different subcultures, and stuff like that. What is the
Mhm.
overall system like? And then maybe talk about how technology at scale
Sure.
helps attack that.
Right. So India's total healthcare expenditure is about $140 billion dollars per year. And as if you contrast India to US, where you have a well-established social security system.
Hmm.
In India, we do have a social security system equivalent. It's called Ayushman Bharat or the National Health Protection Scheme, but it is currently only targeted towards 100 million families and 5 member per family. So 500 million of the poorest people in India get a health benefit of 7,000 US dollars per year if they are actually hospitalized in certain empaneled hospitals. So we do have a great system for the poor people, which was created by the Indian government, and it has definitely created tremendous impact.
Great.
However, given the sheer size of our population of 1.3 billion people,
Yeah.
if we look at the remaining 800 million, out of that, a staggering 500 million people have zero health insurance.
Zero.
Zero. And those who do, typically their average is somewhere in the 5,000 to $6,000 range. In India, the GDP per capita is $2,000, and the cost of critical illness for a cancer, a organ transplant, ICU, and those kinds of expensive ailments would easily be north of $10,000. And, at our peak, we've even crowdfunded $2 million for children
Right.
for the world's most expensive drug. And so for the middle class and the lower middle class, healthcare for critical illnesses is unaffordable when you have zero social security and you have very low amount of health insurance penetration. And as a consequence, $18 billion is the annual out of pocket expense in healthcare in India, just inside private hospitals. And that's a very, very big gap that needs to be funded through a combination of crowdfunding, insurance, lending, and many other new age fintech services. So I would like to describe and summarize the entire situation as the following. India's middle class is one hospital bill away from poverty. That's the best way I can summarize India's overall healthcare financing situation.
And how does tech help fix that? In other words, how does the scalability and the connectability of tech? I understand the crowdfunding part of it, right? And maybe you can walk us through how that works. But I guess the following on question is, can everything be crowdfunded? And if not, what's the other technology, finance, and impact solution that you can build in the context of Impact Guru to close that gap?
So, technology, of course, has a huge role to play in terms of making healthcare more affordable in India, which is a very big challenge for our country. If we talk about crowdfunding, first of all, what is crowdfunding? Crowdfunding is
Hmm.
the practice of pooling money from a large number of people on the internet for a specific purpose. In healthcare, crowdfunding means pooling this money for medical emergencies. It's donations. Therefore, this money does not need to be returned back to the donors. The reason why technology has a huge role to play in increasing affordability is to take advantage of some of the biggest assets of India, our large population, our huge internet penetration, massive smartphone penetration,
Yep.
and increasing digital payments penetration. If somebody requires 7,000 US dollars for treatment, right? Getting a thousand people to contribute $7 is not a very difficult thing given how well connected Indian society is.
Right.
If not a thousand, you could go to 100 people and get $70 each from them.
Yeah.
And, even in a $2,000 GDP per capita kind of economy, people can afford to pay $70 or $20 to their friends and family for medical emergencies. For one individual to pool this kind of money without a technology based crowdfunding platform is simply not possible. That's why in our most successful campaign, Michael, we raised almost $2 million
Yeah.
from 100,000 donors. And technology is the only way you can connect people from 165 countries to contribute towards a single cause and get them real time updates on what is happening with the health of the patient, get them videos, photos, and even detailed updates on when the injection was provided. So technology has a key role to play, not just in crowdfunding, but if we think beyond that, I mean,
Yeah.
you have to solve this gap of healthcare financing through multiple other ways. Now, why is it that insurance penetration is so low in India? Of course, awareness is a very key problem in India, right? The people simply do not realize that this is something they need to do because it's the right thing to create a financial safety net. And how do you educate people at huge scale? Again, you have to use technology to be able to do that, right? Whether you're a digital platform or not. And that's going to be one of our key focus areas, that given that 2.2 million donors have gone through our platform and have helped somebody who is either uninsured or underinsured, it's the right time for them to introspect about their own insurance and figure out how to change that and calibrate that to create the biggest safety net for themselves.
So in the old days, which is just a catch-all phrase for anything that was more than 25 years ago for me, it's really more like 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Insurance as a concept meant that villages would get together and would, in an analog way, set money aside for people inside their village. And this is everywhere in the world, right? Not just in Asia. And just say, if that person got sick, we'll fix it with this money that we've put aside.
Mm-hmm.
And then insurance then became something that companies provided to people, at least in the United States and in Western Europe, this is common. But is there a way to take technology and crowdfunding and move this into a way where not on a one-by-one basis raise money for individuals that need help to cover their healthcare costs, right, for healthcare finance, but to create some kind of continuous infrastructure where people continue to put in, whether it's for local, regional, national, global, however you want to look at it, so that then that money, if government's only doing it for the 500 million poorest people, which is awesome, right? But to do it for the rest of the people that aren't covered and that don't have a mechanism for getting their own insurance yet, we can talk about that too, so that then that platform impact guru itself can then be built so people put money in not for a specific thing, but for everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great idea, Michael, but unfortunately, customer behavior does not actually suit that kind of platform.
Go
That's
ahead.
why it has not been
Yep.
done globally. If we take a deep look at the success of donation-based crowdfunding platforms globally,
Mm-hmm.
some of the largest ones in the world are GoFundMe in the US.
Yep.
Of course, they have a very significant international footprint, and Waterdrop or Shuidi Chow in China.
Yep.
For both of these platforms, healthcare is the single largest category where patients who are sick, when they are appealing to their friends, family, and to the larger world at large, complete strangers, they get tremendous amount of support. What happens when you try and move towards raising money for causes, which is what Impact Group was trying to do in the early phase,
Yep.
raising money for nonprofits, which were raising money for a education cause, animal welfare, or women empowerment, skills training, etc. The personal emotional connect that a donor has with a cause is very different with that of a specific individual, where they know the photograph of that individual, which hospital they are admitted in, what is their exact condition. And that one to one relatability and connectability has actually been the key reason why crowdfunding platform have been able to scale globally, and why companies like GoFundMe have raised $15 billion since their inception. And the largest part of that is raising money for medical causes and personal causes. So while it's a really incredible idea, philanthropic one, that people should be able to pool money for various causes and keep that for a rainy day, unfortunately, donor empathy and donor customer behavior works very, very differently, right? Giving is a very emotional decision,
Yep.
right? You will take a fraction of a second to decide whether you want to support an individual or not. But it's a very complex decision when you say give to this cause as compared to give to Piyush. You may know him directly or through a friend.
Right.
And that's the fundamental reason individual crowdfunding is very successful as compared to cause based crowdfunding, particularly in emerging markets like China and India.
I understand. And do you sense, based on the data that you gather, because I'm sure you're gathering data, every time somebody gives, you see to whom they're giving, to what they're giving, and what's resonating with the donors.
Mm-hmm.
Is there fatigue that's associated with individual givers? Do you know what I mean? In other words, I've already given to this, I've given to that, I've given to this, I'm done kind of thing? Or do you see the same people, the same groups of people giving over and over again?
Right. So there are different segments within donors in terms of behavior. I mean, Michael, if I were to ask you a question, you have five friends,
Yep.
from college, and each five of them has gone through a medical emergency during COVID. Would you be willing to pay $20 to each one of them, no matter which sequence they came in?
Sure.
I think the vast majority of people will say yes,
Yeah.
right? But if I were to say, Michael, would you donate to five complete strangers, right? Maybe you would do a first time, maybe you would do it a second time, but maybe the third, fourth, or fifth time, there could be some kind of fatigue. So the reason why crowdfunding is highly scalable is because every patient has a very unique and distinct social network. And of course, if there are distinct patients who are eventually reaching the same Michael for a fundraising appeal, very often people will contribute because they know those individuals. Will the generosity go down towards complete strangers when you are asking them again and again? The answer is yes. This is why we have launched a monthly subscription product, Give Every Month, where we are enabling our donors, once they are transacting towards the customer and they realize that this is such an incredibly transparent way to transact and to get impact reports, people want to donate on a monthly basis, but they do
Interesting.
not have the time to go find 12 unique patients to help each and every month.
Right.
So that's where we have solved this problem for them and said we are now creating pools of money. There is an Impact Guru Cancer Fund, an Impact Guru Transplant Fund, an Impact Guru Rare Disease Fund. We always have thousands of patients who are in short supply of capital. Can you allow us to use your generous money to help those patients? And we will give you the detailed reports of which patient we help each and every month.
Right. And
Um,
that's the answer to the previous question though, right? Is this subscription model, which sounds, I mean, again, it solves the problem that I was talking about before, right? You can't just ask a million people or a billion people to donate a dollar and end up with $1 billion. But what you can say is we can, I'm guessing, give you some kind of sort of empathetic benefit, right? You just know that we have this cancer fund, give to the cancer fund, give to the kidney fund, give to this, and do it monthly. It's not a lot of money, $10 a month, $3 a month. It doesn't matter. But if there's also, and I don't know how it works in India, but in the US, there'd be a tax benefit for giving that money. So it's almost like it's post-tax money that you're giving away. So there's an incentive to do it there as well. Is that true in India too?
Right. So there are tax benefits that are applicable for donors who donate money to nonprofits. And Impact Guru has also partnered with various nonprofits in India to provide such tax benefits to its donors.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll be surprised that even in China, just two healthcare crowdfunding platforms together are raising $3 billion from 600 million unique donation transactions per year. It's a
Yeah.
staggering number. So while the monthly subscription model is highly scalable and is definitely the need of the hour in India, to solve the donor problem, they want to help patients every single month, but do not have the time to identify
Exactly.
12 unique patients.
Exactly.
On the flip side, the scalability of each patient raising money from 100 to 200 distinct people is so much that helping people is a more fundamental need, as part of humanity as compared to even shopping for e-commerce. And that's why crowdfunding platforms have scaled so much so, because as long as somebody is paying digitally, and which is a very staggering number of people who are using digital payments and UPI, etc.
Right.
You will be able to convince eventually a large part of that public to transact and give to help others. And it's part of Indian culture to be generous.
Right. So this is the other question I was going to ask you. I mean, there are a couple of things that I wanted to mention there. One is this idea that because there's UPI, which means that there is a universal payments infrastructure in India, like you said, the internet penetration is high and mobile phone penetration is high, which means that for people to do it, it's relatively frictionless, right? You've got big companies like PhonePe of 400, 500 million users. That's just one example. But it's
Mm-hmm.
ubiquitous in India. That's the whole point of UPI, which means that
Mm-hmm.
giving should be easy. But there's also a
Yeah.
cultural element to this as well. And not just in India. Everybody approaches this sort of healthcare financing from a different angle. But at the end of the day, humans are empathetic beings. And if we give them a way to do this, and here's where technology comes in because it gives you scale, right? In other words, if you walk into the main part of town, we go back to the village metaphor, and just say Piyush needs money because he found out he has cancer or he broke his leg, people will just be like, oh no, let's give. But it's the tech now in the mobile phone that makes that village bigger and allows people to participate in a way that couldn't happen before. That's the scale. I want to ask you this though. You mentioned before 165 countries. Are there donations or contributions that you're getting from outside of India as well?
Yes, absolutely. 30% of all of our contributions come from international donors, and the US being the second largest geography from where the donors actually contribute. So, US, UK, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, where you have large parts of the Indian diaspora residing, they
Yeah.
contribute significantly to again help back friends, family, or complete strangers to give back to India.
And what's the discovery model like? Right? Is it just Facebook ads? It has to be more than that. How do they find out and how do they get to decide for the ones that are actually deciding on their own, like this is the cause that I want to support? How do they find out and how do they decide?
So I would say that there are two key modes of discovery. The first mode is a WhatsApp message. And so the way that would work is if I'm the patient, for example, and I would send a message to my own immediate circles, let's say to my JP Morgan, BCG, Wharton, and Harvard friends.
Yep.
Those messages would then get further distributed to their connections, who will be second degree for me. My first degree will send to their first degree, so they are second degree to me. And that's how the message gets further spread. And so that's how a lot of people in India, particularly in South India, they have huge communities living in parts of the US, parts of the Middle East, and these messages get viral very, very quickly. The amount of generosity that exists is very, very high for Indian people, no matter where they live in the world.
Yeah.
That's one mode of discovery where somebody you know is forwarding that message, and you will contribute because it's coming from a very referred source.
Right.
That's how it works. The second channel is, of course, Impact Guru's organic and paid marketing communication. Once we have established a relationship with our donors, we want to keep them updated and give them opportunities to create more impact. And that happens through our email, WhatsApp communication, and of course, for very time sensitive cases, we run Facebook, YouTube, Google advertisements to be able to fundraise in a short amount of time. So those are the two modes of discovery for donors. And so, of course, there is a certain segment of donors who decide today is my birthday, my anniversary. I'm feeling great. I'm just going to go to Impact Guru and contribute. But a lot of it is the pull of the powerful stories of patients struggling to fund medical emergencies. And that message somehow reaches the donor organically or through other means. It's it is a small percentage who will come directly on Impact Guru who will say, let me try and find which patient I am resonating with most. It's typically one or two stories they come across on WhatsApp, social media, and they get really moved and they contribute.
So are you consciously creating content and actively telling stories about Impact Guru's successes? I think you said earlier something about creating videos. Who
Mm-hmm.
knows? I mean, I'm sure they're not hour-long documentaries, but they could be
Sure.
5-minute videos about here's a person who needed help, here's a group of people that helped them, here's what happens after you help somebody out. Is there a part of Impact Guru that's just constantly creating stories around these successes?
Absolutely. So, the number one way we communicate the success is by updating our donors about what happened to the patient to whom they contributed money towards. That's part of our standard operating process. So, we've already helped 20,000 plus patients, and each one of the donors who have contributed towards that can see maybe a message every 3 to 4 days, depending on the kind of hospitalization they have, or every 2 weeks about what is exactly the medical condition of that actual patient. Number two, on social media, we create lots of success stories where we, on social media talk about, what have 1,000 donors or 5,000 donors or 100,000 donors' contribution together pooled, and what has the impact that that money has actually created.
Right.
And we create video thank yous from our patients so that our donors are able to firsthand see the impact of their $20, $10, or even $50,000 contribution towards those patients. And so storytelling is the key, but also the narrative on the impact that it created through the success stories is equally important.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things my grandfather said to me before he passed away, and you'll see this relevance in a second, was when you get married, you never marry an individual person, you marry an entire family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same when you help somebody. If you help that individual, you're not just helping them. And that's part of the impact. And it's not just the family, right? There's a community impact as well. There's also a global impact, regardless of what people think. But this idea that you're just giving money to help Piyush is wrong, right? It's a misconception. There's a whole family there that benefits from the healthiness of that person. If you are building a platform and you discussed earlier this idea of financial literacy and just the understanding of insurance products and the penetration of products, is there a way, and is there even a desire as you get bigger and bigger to help people obtain insurance as well and educate them about it? So is there a financial literacy and a financial inclusion angle to this as well?
Absolutely. In fact, if we talk about Waterdrop in China,
Yep.
they are today, in terms of their impact, they've been able to sell $3 billion worth of health insurance premiums. It's a staggering number.
It is.
And they achieved this in 4 years' time
Right.
So much so that that scale of 3 billion is 50% of the scale of Ant Financial. And it took Ant Financial a decade to get there,
Right.
which demonstrates the important role a crowdfunding platform can play in educating donors
Yeah.
and the community at large about the importance of health insurance and also the adequate level of health insurance.
Right.
And we at Impact Guru are going to be playing a critical role in both of those two aspects of insurance. And we are going to be starting that very, very soon in our company. Because we feel that to be able to solve India's healthcare financing problem, you have to take multiple approaches and integrate crowdfunding, insurance, and even lending to be able to solve people's gap and do it in a very impactful, differentiated way, right? So that people are able to really get the benefit of doing whatever they can to protect the downside against massive catastrophic medical expenditure.
Yeah, and if there's a funnel that's associated with this, and if the bottom of the funnel is people just, having access to capital for medical problems or healthcare problems, is the top of the funnel just being healthier to begin with? Do you know what I mean? Is part of not financial education, but is part of sort of the healthcare education that you're providing and the literacy that you're providing, telling people just be more healthy as well if they can, right?
Yeah, I mean, not an easy problem
No,
to
no.
overcome. I think there are some great companies focused on that in India today who are trying to get people to be healthy, whether it's on nutrition, whether it's on exercise, whether it's on many other aspects of health and wellness, on diagnostics, etc. So, of course, that's not a core area of focus for our company,
Got it.
given the kind of resources and the kind of mission we have today. I think our mission gets activated once somebody has a problem. But to prevent a serious financial catastrophe due to medical expenses, insurance, of course, would be a great solution. If it's a small gap, lending would be a great solution. But if it's a very large gap, and particularly if you have mortality risk, crowdfunding would be the perfectly viable solution. So it's going to be a combination of these three approaches, which we will take to the market to help our patients. And our aim is to help 1 million patients by 2030. It's a very steep goal, and we have a long way to go for that.
One more thing before I let you go. When you look back at the experience that you had in the public policy school at Harvard, and when you think about the research that you did around helping NGOs raise money, and you fast forward to today, is there an inherent happiness in what you believe you'll continue to be able to accomplish as you grow to impacting the lives of over 1 million people, particularly considering all the ups and downs you had at the beginning with this? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that has been the biggest learning. I think in this journey, happiness is not correlated with wealth creation.
Nope.
For me as an entrepreneur.
Nope.
For me, happiness is correlated to how much impact I can create.
Yep.
And I think to be able to see on a first hand basis the kind of generosity that exists in the world, right? To be able to witness one donation per second on our platform and the power of technology to create this kind of impact is really something incredible, right? No amount of, like, if I were to have done any other kind of venture, it would not have given me this kind of happiness. And so the objective is to scale that 100x from where we are today. And we know that we have the right backing, the right advisors, investors, the right employees, the right customers, hospital partners who believe in this shared mission that let's solve India's healthcare financing problem, because it really puts over 50 million people into poverty every single year in India. And this is a problem statement that collectively as a society, as a company, we can change it, right? And we need to change it today, not 10 years from now, not 20 years from now. And so I am personally always amazed by the kind of impact that the technology platform can create. And we feel genuinely that we are just scratching the surface. Yeah. And, today the goal is 10 million. Of course, we will take, 1 million patients by 2030. We always want to take steeper targets, but it's a very big country. Even 1 million out of 1.3 billion is not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Piyush Jain, a co-founder and CEO at Impact Guru. Thank you so much for taking the time and doing this today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Michael, once again for inviting me to the show. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.